V-Gates. Just wanted to get on to part 8 of our video series here that I'm going to do on building a new gaming table. That will reach the part where we're actually going to start doing the sand, the Elmer's glue sand. We're going to let that dry really well. Go back over it with a watered down Elmer's glue, let that dry so the sand is really hard and stable. Then on top of that, I'm gonna roll on a sand colored latex paint on top of that. It'll still give it some nice, it'll still have some nice texture, but it'll be smooth, a smooth, rough texture if you can put it that way. And then while that paint is still wet, I'm going to sprinkle on some grass flocking. Possibly we'll see. I may let that paint dry all the way and then just use some wet Elmer's glue or watered down Elmer's glue, and then the flocking. I haven't really done that yet. I'm kind of concerned that maybe the paint will come through the flocking, so I may want to let the paint completely dry. The more I think about it, that's probably the route that I'm going to go. But I just wanted to kind of set this up. We're getting closer to the end of this board, and then we'll start working on our D-Day landing section that we've been talking about, and then I'll start showing you maybe some painting tutorials, little things like that, little tips, and get into some Flames of War tutorials, explaining some of the rules and the things that we're dealing with on putting building army lists. So I did really want to briefly, I said in one of my earlier videos that I would go into some of the background of how I got into gaming. It may be familiar to a lot of you guys. Going back to the 70s, since I was revealing my age here, obviously, born in 1965 in Kentucky, central Kentucky. The 70s was obviously the time when Dungeons and Dragons became a huge phenomenon. I think I first heard about it on the evening news. It was something that was sweeping the country. We had a local bookstore in Columbus, Ohio called Readmore, and we used to ride our bicycles up there, to pick up paperbacks. We read the usual, War of the Worlds. Of course, Star Wars had come out, and there was several series books that we used to read. We'd go up there, and then one day we went up there, and there was an area set aside for Dungeons and Dragons. They had the beginner box set. They had some the dice and all these sort of things. So we picked up the first box set, and we were on fire. That's all we did for months was draw up characters and play Dungeons and Dragons constantly. So that's pretty much where it picked up for me. Saturday nights, Friday nights, we're talking early middle school, what we called back then. In the old days, we called it junior high. And along came cars and girls. I had a paper route, mowed grass, and then when I turned 16, was able to drive, I got my first quote-unquote real job working at a cafeteria, a local cafeteria. I worked there for 5 years, all the way through high school, being in the marching band and things like that. I basically kind of got away from gaming a little bit. I still played some Dungeons and Dragons. There were several guys that I hung out with that we still regularly played. Got to the point that kind of died off as we got into college. But in college, I went away to the University of Minnesota, And one of the local, I was a big hobbyist anyways. I like to build models and I like to do those sorts of things growing up as a kid. And back then we didn't have the internet, so I pulled out the Minneapolis St. Paul Yellow Pages and looked up hobby shops. Got in my little Volkswagen Bug and I went to a couple of local hobby shops. And one of the hobby shops, and honestly I forget the name of the store, and I'm pretty sure it's still there. I'll have to look it up and give it to you, but I looked it up a couple months ago online and the store's still there. It was it was listed under the hobby shop section. I went into this other hobby shop. It was more closer to downtown Minneapolis, and it was a gaming store. And I walked in and said, "Oh, this isn't like the usual hobby shop I'm used to seeing," and I was blown away. Of course, the main thing that we had when I walked in there was Warhammer 40K. They had a big section in the back of the store with vending machines and gaming tables. Tons of product up front, very helpful staff, and I was immediately drawn into the 40K. Once I saw my first little Space Marine fully painted in a display case in that store, I was hooked. I said, "Oh, I got to find out what this is all about." So that's kind of where it started for me with the wargaming side of things. I just kind of stumbled onto it. Didn't really even know it existed, to be honest with you. I had heard of guys playing historicals and things like that. So that's kind of where I got started. I picked up my first box set. I still have some of those first 40K figures. So you guys that are big 40K fans would probably love to get your hands on them. We're talking about the old school metal 40K miniatures. The old school ones where they had what would they call it, the Mach 1 with the more of the pointy helmet. Just amazing. I just was really drawn in. Then they came out with a box set with the first sprues, where we had to actually put them together, and I had to put clay on the bases to keep them weighed down. So that's kind of where it started for me. Flames of War. Flames of War started for me. Played 40K. I never really got into fantasy much. I knew it existed. I'd seen guys play it. Moving back here to Columbus after college, there was a local gaming store here. If you're from the Columbus area, you'll remember the old Drowsy Dragon on the east side of Columbus over by Bexley. They had a lot of Dungeons and Dragons stuff, so I went over there. I still was into the Dungeons and Dragons, collecting the miniatures, buying the dungeon modules, and occasionally getting a group of guys together and we would roll up a dungeon. And then kind of just went from there. Kind of died out a little bit, got into starting my own business. Children came along, a marriage obviously before that. Met my wife, got married, and keep an eye on my video usage here because we can't go over 15 minutes. It's an issue with YouTube, but kind of the gaming kind of fell aside. I still had all my stuff. I still had all the books. Moved to Delaware, Ohio to build a building for my business and a bigger home. But long story short, my local game hobby shop here, which honestly turns out it's not the greatest shop in the world. The guy that owns it is a sweet guy, but he's a little remiss on how he runs his business, I guess. But I really don't go over there a whole lot anymore. It's kind of hodgepodge, but I basically stumbled in over there. I'd go there for model rockets. I ran a Cub Scout pack, and we used to go over to this local hobby shop to pick up model rockets. And I'm walking through the aisles, and he had a little area that had Flames of War, and I was like, this is interesting. I love World War II genre in general. What's this all about? And I kind of put it off for a year. It looked expensive, and having young kids, and we're still building our business up. I thought, well, that's something I don't really need to be spending money on. I was still buying 40K models. My young son at that time was getting interested in 40K. He got into the Eldar, and we bought him some more Eldar stuff. We bought the new codexes. Obviously, since the time I had played in college, it had drastically changed, and we kind of got back into that. And then eventually, I just decided, it was I think in the winter, it was my downtime, and we had some cash, and I said, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to get into this World War II thing. I'm going to buy the rule book, which was version 2 at that point. I'll pick up a couple boxes of tanks, and there was a guy there in the store who was selling his German army, and I went ahead and purchased the German army that he was selling. It turns out a lot of the stuff that I bought was really, it was early war German army, basically, is what it turned out to be. I didn't really at that point realize. I just kind of got into it quickly. I saw the minis were halfway decently painted. I thought I could touch them up and make them a little better. And I thought, oh, this will give me off to a great start. So I bought this army for, I don't know, $300. It had a bunch of Panzer IVs, some artillery, some infantry, a lot of half tracks, which I will admit I do use the half tracks quite a bit. But get them home, I start digging into the book and start digging into the army lists, and realized after our first couple of games, we purchased my son some Soviets. And if being a Flames of War player, you figure out real quickly that Panzer IVs don't match too well with IS-2s for the Soviets. They get blown away. So then I ran out and bought Tigers, of course, and it just kind of becomes an escalation thing, just like in real life. My son buys more Russian stuff, I buy more German stuff, and it kind of escalates from there. So that's kind of my background, how I got into gaming. Started building my first board. Started building my own terrain. Started going to the local gaming convention. It's called Origins. And then picking up purpose-built terrain at those type of shows. So it kind of just snowballs into that, so to speak. So I'll end it there. As we go through some videos in the future, maybe I'll think of some other things that jog my memory on the way things used to be, and when I first got into gaming. But anyways, that's it. I'm going to take the camera out here, and we'll start preparing the board for sand.